Okay. And keep admitting people. So we're going to give just another minute or two because people are just now coming in. A lot of people signed up tonight. And Beth, I may just have to let you take over admitting people. So
I can do it. Don't worry.
okay. Oh, that was. Can I ask Zoom user to please identify yourself?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, this is Kate Hanauer. I'm typing it in now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, well, we're a minute after, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure there will be people coming into the meeting. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening. I'm going to try to be a little bit better at asking the right questions as we go through, but I wanted to welcome everyone. So we're going to jump right into our kind of quick business segment of this meeting because about 7:30 we have the folks from ST3 joining us to give an overview of the Sound Transit project, and in particular a little bit of information about the draft EIS and how we can most effectively respond. So with that, I'm going to ask if there are any questions or corrections about the January minutes. Hopefully everyone on the board has seen those. Questions, corrections? None. Call for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. I will also, I have a committee report summary of note summary that I'll submit in writing. I apologize that it didn't get sent out, but I didn't have everything until this afternoon. So it's literally a summary of the committee reports that are actually already in the committee folders, but I'll ask for that to be included in the minutes so that it's recorded. Ben, we're going to go right to you to talk about money.
Okay. So for our general account, we currently have $234.47. And in the appeals fund, it is $3,424.75. We did have two expenditures this month, and that was both for checks on both accounts, one for 22.25 and the other one for 23.05. Currently, we are in a transition in that we're now accepting donations through the donation button, but they haven't hit our accounts yet. So that will be coming in the next month's meeting. But just as a heads up, we have already received some $704.83, plus another $500 check donation that was outside of our donor box. And that is it for treasurer.
Thank you. Any questions about that? I'm going to talk really briefly about the put together. Oh, I'm sorry. So I saw a hand. Don?
Yeah, Ben, I was looking over the sheet. Oh, maybe this isn't the right time. So it was on the Christmas. I was wondering about the Queen Anne Ave Christmas tree. And I just saw that it was listed, that Paula paid for it, but I'm wondering, I guess, how much, or was that outside the Queen Anne Community Council? I thought it was inside the Queen Anne Community Council, so I'm wondering whether Paula was made whole, I guess. That's my...
I'll go ahead and let Paula answer.
I'll answer that. So I am not totally whole, but I know where to find everyone. So I'm still working on a few folks. But anyway, it's not, I'm not going to come back and ask for the money out of what our donations are to cover that tree. So, and let me, in fact, that's really kind of a good segue, and I'm going to take just a minute to share the screen and pull up a document that I think everybody will find helpful. Okay, so just one second. I think if it'll open, you may find it helpful. Okay, can anybody see it? Can you see the screen? Okay, great. Okay, so this is a budget worksheet that I put together, and I'm going to get rid of your pictures. Okay, this is a budget worksheet that I put together. So it shows two things, two categories. One, the actuals are at the top and projections at the bottom. So this shows the balance forward, and that's from our checking accounts. So that's the money that was there that Ben just reported on. In addition, we've had actual donations that hit the bank of $704.83. So when people donate, there's a small fee that comes out. So that's why we get these odd numbers. So total revenues that we have right now are $4,364.05. The expenditures these were deductions from our bank accounts for the checks. So those are the only expenditures that we've incurred. So we have a balance of $4,318.75. So next month, all of this will catch up, and you'll see that information. This will keep running, so it'll be the current month always at the top, and then the historical stuff will flow below. In-kind donations. So for now, just things like this, I'm not asking for reimbursement. I would like to see us have some money in there before we start, doing that kind of thing. So, but we needed to record them. Otherwise, we don't have any tracking system. So these are in-kind donations. Projections are, so these are projections for donations that we haven't fully realized yet. So right now we actually have donations that are working their way through the banking systems for $1,204.83. And then I took monthly expenses and broke them down. It's mostly Zoom and MailChimp, but in October, I think it is, the domain name fee comes up. And then because the state filing fee has already been done for this year, we don't incur that $10 until 2023. So as of right now, if we don't spend money on anything, we'll have $206.88 still in our piggy bank at the end of the year. Any questions about this while I have it up, or if there aren't questions, I can take it down. I can't see hands, so you'll have to speak up.
So Paula,
Yes.
thank you for adding in the website domain and the domain name.
Right.
Yeah, cost. So that's great. But I just have one question. It's probably of Ben, maybe, for the treasurer's report. And then just curious as to what the two checks were written for.
There
on
was
the
one,
expense.
there was one check that was written as a donation for $500. Oh, the two checks.
Smaller
there
checks
were
as expenses.
they
They're
were to
not
order.
checks. I'm sorry. That's right.
Yeah, no, those were to purchase checks with the new address.
Oh, okay, cool.
They were actually deducted from the checking account, but the expenditure was for checks.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. And so, so we are also at the point where going forward, if anyone is requesting funds, either to be reimbursed for something they've spent money for, or to request money to be sent somewhere, we do have the expense and reimbursement request form, and we will use that form, and we'll follow the procedure on that we wrote up, where we get board approval. So,
Paula, it's Sharon. I wanted to ask Ben the status of our donation that we were making to Tree Pack. Didn't we vote to give $3,000 to Tree Pack for the appeal?
We did. I haven't received anything from Denny in terms of actually getting an expenditure.
it was actually,
So-
I'm sorry, Ben, go ahead.
And I don't know if he's requesting the full amount. Also, that would be in next month's statement and not, this is the December statement.
Yeah, it's actually for January through February. It was for $2,000. It hasn't been requested. He's waiting for a couple things to happen. Okay. Any other questions before I take down the? Okay. Okay. Does that answer your question, Sharon? All right, great, thanks. Okay, anything else on the worksheet? So that'll be it's on the G Drive, and if you want the link, you can have the link. It'll be in the board folder. So anyway, so I think that's about it on that. Okay, we're going to talk really quickly about our update on the Queen Anne Community Council goals. Beth, did you want to provide an overview on that? And I can bring up the tracking document if you'd like.
Sorry, Paula, do you want me to do it?
You can. I'll start it out thanking you, Deborah Santos and Ben Friedman, for the work that you guys did on taking the goals in their rough form and making them more comprehensive and polished. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and screen share. And first, I'm going to share the tracking document. Can everybody see it? Okay, great. So do you want to talk about this, Beth?
Hey, Paula, can you make it larger on your screen, please? Some of us, our eyes are a little bad. If not, I'll just squint and go off camera.
Let me see if I can.
Bottom right of the document, you'll see the,
Yeah, I can make the document itself larger.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
okay, and then
Might
I'll,
I think if you click on focus down on the bottom there, some of the extraneous stuff will go away.
I'm on a Mac, so I'd have to find, if I go to full screen, then I have trouble navigating back to Zoom. Sorry, because my Zoom bar is up here over most of the functions. But okay, so are we okay to use it this way? Okay, Beth, did you want to talk about this at all?
Sure, thanks. And thanks for Deb and Ben for doing the lion's share of the work on this. What we've done is broken the goals into kind of three big buckets. The first bucket is building our relationship within the community, both in terms of our outward reaching with our newsletter, our meetings, and then trying to get more input from the community members. So that's first bucket. Second bucket is externally looking, forging relationships with government officials, with other community organizations. And then the third bucket is organizational development. And then we've then tried to identify some metrics within each of the goals. And I think it would be great, since this just came out, Ben, thank you so much for doing this on the weekend. So this just came out this today. It'd be great if everybody wants to take a look at it and shoot us some ideas. If you've got other metrics, if you've got other ideas about what we could do to measure our success or goals that we could put in there. But I think it's great to kind of divide our focus into these three buckets: the community, the external, and then the organizational. And we're going to need people to step up on all three plates. So that's where we are.
And just a couple of points to make. So where there are metrics, I mean, these are really metrics to tell us how we're doing. So example, the newsletter subscribers, well, we currently have 675 and the goal is to increase it to 1,400 and something. So, you know, we may not achieve the goal, but if we're working to get more people to participate and read the newsletter, check the website, we'll increase that number. So these are, we may have to revise the goals as we go along too. So that's it. There's a lot of kind of thought that went behind this. And so I'm going to pull up that document. And so this is sort of the nuts and bolts that Deborah helped put into a framework. Now I've got it too big. Okay, so this is just a narrative version of the goals without the metrics. But you'll see there's building the participation, increasing the newsletter subscriptions and more outreach, doing some goodwill projects, doing more social media publishing, and the same buckets, but these are just with some ways to get to some of those goals. So this information was all in the email that I sent yesterday, I think it was. So you can read through those goals, provide any questions that you might have. And anyway, it gives us targets for the year, and we'll just work on those. It'll keep us on task. So any questions on any of this?
I've got a comment.
Yeah.
Or question, however you want to look at it. Basically on item 3A.
Yes.
What I want to suggest is, you know, you might think about a little different wording on that. The bylaws 7.1 talk about how we change our bylaws or how we start to change it. And I know Beth knows this. And I'm not saying, all I'm thinking of is when I read A at first, and I don't think you meant it like this way, but it was like, oh, the compliance committee is going to change the bylaws. They're going to come up, they're going to talk about it, and they're going to change it. So maybe in there a little more a process, right? You know, kind of. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. And yeah, the compliance committee won't rewrite the bylaws, but the compliance committee will make sure that we follow the procedure that's laid out in the bylaws about how we go about changing them. So when we get to the point of reviewing the bylaws and getting input on what needs to be changed or what we'd like to change or whatever the situation is, that'll be a collective effort among everybody on the board who wants to participate. So
right. So I guess I would just say then, you know, to be so that other people can look at this too. I mean, I'm not sure how many times the board decides to, you know, preview the bylaws, but is maybe to mention that in the bylaw, compliance committee is talking about, you know, just something that sort of points people to that.
okay.
So that it's just a little clearer for everybody.
Okay, sounds good. We can make a little edit there. Okay, anything else? Any more questions on this? So I don't see any hands. Okay, I'm gonna
Follow one additional thing, this is Ben Friedman, to think about is, while these are goals for our entire committee, it would potentially be good to assign like a point person for each of the that should be responsible for each of these sub goals. I don't know if it's by committee or by person, but also something to think about so that we have some accountability for each of these line items. But we don't have to solve it right now.
Yeah, good suggestion, Ben. And that's a great way for people to participate and be involved and take some ownership in what's happening with the council. So thank you. Good idea.
Great.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. I'm going to make a couple of comments right now before. So around 7:30, the folks from Sound Transit will be with us. So I'm going to fill in some time right now. And if we have time, we'll do a couple of committee reports. We won't get to all of them, but I wanted to thank Laura Corby and her husband, Bob Davis, who have very generously offered to join forces. We are partnering now with the Queen Anne Community Council to further the Business Watch organization, which is Queen Anne Together. So we'll have more boots on the ground, so to speak, feet on the street to get the word out. And Laura and Bob will be reaching out to businesses in Upper Queen Anne to reactivate the group and get further input on crime prevention issues in our business community, and all this without any alcohol being involved. Then I also want to extend some kudos to Bob Kettle, who learns, of course, that persistence pays off. So he has been very generously sharing his information on the Public Safety Committee and his activities with our Public Safety Committee, with the Public Safety Director for the City of Seattle, who has finally gotten the message and has reached out and said he would like to permanently be involved in our Public Safety Committee and attend the meetings. So good for you, Bob. He's also been, he invited Sarah Nelson's Chief of Staff to the Public Safety Committee meeting with with Captain Strand last month. And so now that has opened up an avenue, and they're very interested in what not only public safety is doing, but what the council is doing. And finally, Creighton and Bob, and I don't know who's taking leadership, but they're both co-conspirators, have been really actively encouraging restoration and taking care of the Veterans Memorial that is outside of Memorial Stadium. And as probably everybody knows, we have an election or a vote that's coming up very quickly here. So you have a ballot about the school levy, and a part of that is for renovation of Memorial Stadium down at the Seattle Center. And that memorial is outside the stadium and in need of a lot of TLC. So Bob and has been leading that effort, and talked to Tim Burgess, who was very supportive of it. So we may see a lot more about that. So it's we have, I think, time for a couple of really quick committee reports. So Bob, do you want to go first? And then Jasmine and Jessica, if we have a few minutes, we'll also do transportation. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys right after the Sound Transit presentation.
Yeah, just really quickly, as Paula mentioned, our last committee meeting was with our new West Precinct leadership team of Captain Strand and Lieutenant Brown. It went really well. Paula and I had met with Captain Strand prior to that too. So a great kickoff for their start for our relationship between the West Precinct leadership and the Queen Anne Community Council. Started off the meeting talking about reform efforts. Also talked about the commercial core, some of the crime and public safety challenges that are being faced on Queen Avenue North and some of the other commercial arterials. Theft generally across all the residentials, car prowls, catalytic converters, shoplifting and the like. And then we also talk about graffiti. There's a couple things on the graffiti part. One is the standard tagging that we're really working to tackle. And then we have a specific case with an individual who's been doing some really mean-spirited and some questionable, well, more than questionable. We're concerned about what he's doing, and we're concerned that it's going downhill. And it's going to end up in a tragic situation. So we communicated that with Captain Strand, Lieutenant Brown, and they put a detective on the case, and that detective is making progress. I don't think there's any final resolution right now, but as Paula had on our slide earlier, we hope that this can be a win too, where this person gets intercepted earlier rather than later, because later could be a problem. And I think that would be a great thing for the community. We had discussion about non-SPD options for public safety. And then also talked about traffic and pedestrian safety as well. And as Paula mentioned, we did have council member Sarah Nelson's chief of staff, Jeremy Moan, joining us, and we had some follow-up with them. And as Paula noted, the new director of public safety, former head of the OPI police accountability effort, has reached out to us, and so looking to develop lines of communication with him, much like we do with Captain Strand and Lieutenant Brown at the West Precinct. And I think that would be great to highlight the issues that are facing us, and then also have some impact in terms of the broader public safety issues in the city. Mentioned graffiti. Next meeting is not going to be a meeting via Zoom. It's going to be a little meetup by Eviva there on McGraw and Queen Avenue North, and whoever shows up, we're going to get our Find It, Fix It apps ready to go, and we're going to walk and we're going to report all the graffiti that we can find. And really, the idea is that we're not accepting this, and we're going to take action to help it. And the city's been great in terms of responding and cleaning up. Not only do we get signs clean, like traffic signs, I've gotten a new sign in my neighborhood. I've gotten stop signs clean, but then also straightened and fixed. So it's a win-win across the board. And the last thing is West Precinct Advisory Council continues. Paul and I attend, and it's starting to get itself organized. And I think with Captain Strand's new leadership, it's going to be better than it was before. That's it.
Thank you.
Got a raised hand from Caroline. Was that for me or for?
Go ahead, Caroline.
It's not really a question, but Aviva seems to be gone. Their sign is down, and that place is being remodeled. So you may want to just give the specific address of where you want people to meet versus Aviva.
Well, we're going to meet there.
We do.
I know the business. And by the way, there's a number of businesses that are closed and or closing this year due to some of the security challenges and the like, which was communicated to the West Precinct leadership and through Council Member Nelson's chief of staff. But we're just going to meet there. We're going to have like a quick talk, and then we're going to be walking down the streets and then meeting up, hopefully to get something nice coffee outside, COVID smart, but so it's an outdoor event. And so it's gonna be quick. It's gonna be a quick meet up there. It's not gonna be really a meeting there. We're gonna, rally there and then move out along the arterials to then, find and hunt and report graffiti.
I'm just worried about people starting if they don't know where that is.
I designated the corner. I said.
Yeah, McGraw and Queen Avenue North and McGraw. Yes, the corner.
We're good. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're going to need to wait until after the Sound Transit presentation to talk about transportation and parks and LRC. So, Lita, are you here? There are a lot of people, so I'm trying to read everybody's names. Alexis, I see you.
Hi.
I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then I also want to make you a co-host, and I don't know who will be driving slides.
It'll be me.
Okay, great. That was a good choice then. And Lita let's see, I'm looking.
So there should be 3 more people coming. Lita should be coming. Emily Yasukochi, who presented tonight, should be coming, and then Laura Radford.
Right. And I don't see them yet, but I see somebody just came in. That's Jessica though. Okay. Well, if they are not here yet, then Lita, you're not here. Okay, so let's go ahead then. And Jasmine and Jessica, would you like to provide a quick update on Transportation Committee and what's happening and what's going to happen?
Sure, Jasmine, did you want to take it, or do you want me to? There you are.
I'll pass it to you first while I get my notes all queued up and whatnot.
Okay. And I have a quick plug at the end of the transportation committee. So good meeting last week. We had actually notes will be posted. I sent them to Paula. But can somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, I got a lot of thumbs up. Great, thanks. We had Jacob Thorpe from Andrew Lewis's office join our meeting, and it was a very, very fruitful meeting. We talked a lot about some subjects that, the priorities that we're looking at here in Queen Anne. It goes a lot along with Bob's public safety. We talked a lot about dusk to dawn lighting and just some additional lighting on Queen Anne beyond into the interior, beyond the Ave. Because there is not a lot of lighting and it gets very dangerous and it's less pedestrian. So he gave us some ideas on that will be posted on the G Drive that we will bring to the committee. And basically talked about the community project process. So we're going to be diving into that for some of those projects. Jasmine, I know, did you want to give the update on the traffic calming on 10th Ave West, or I can touch on that? And then there is the update on the Florentia Street being reclassified. And that is going to go to the LERC committee for the March public hearing. So as soon as all of that information comes, that will go through Denny in the LERC meeting. So stay tuned for that public hearing. And 10th Ave West traffic calming. Did you want to take that, Jasmine?
Sure, I can go for that. 10th Ave West. So we're in a weird little spot where things are starting to get back on track to where they should have been pre-pandemic and whatnot. So we've been seeing that with various what's it called? The Your Voice, Your Choice projects. And now 10th Ave West was a project that was like slated to be fixed. And then like the pandemic happened. And so that project got cut. But they specifically have like a funding source with the Vision Zero funding being supplemented by parking in the downtown and across the city core and whatnot. So they have funding, they have people on it, and they're pulling it back up from the pre-pandemic grave.
And that's basically it. Jacob is free to come to any of our future meetings. And I think we have probably SDOT on the line now. So if I could wrap up just by giving a plug here, and I see Kylie Kaiser is on. I don't know if anybody knows Kylie Kaiser, but she has been working with me on taking a lot of the reins on this. So doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the construction, our construction project that's going to go up around the Safeway at the 21 Boston project. And that is going to be coming soon. And it is closer than it's ever been. They're closing on the land. They were looking to close on the land at least end of January, beginning of February. So we're right in that time frame. We know that there is a concrete strike right now going on. So they're trying to get everything in order to really start the fencing and the construction project. So we are just looking possibly for a couple of volunteers. And Laura, I don't know if maybe you and your husband want to join us, but to kind of go up and down Queen Anne Ave and split up the duties just to touch the businesses, to see if they are interested in having their QR codes listed on the mural map that is going to be on the fencing. And we were thinking, Friday afternoon or Saturday. We don't have to meet up. You can communicate with me and I can reach out to Kylie and we can split up just some of the businesses that haven't already answered our calls to put their QR code up. And so that is my shameless plug for help to go up and down Queen Anne and talk to the businesses. We will have a sample of the mural so that we can show them what it will be like, why their QR code will go up there. And it's really just to drive business to the core businesses during that construction period. So if anyone would like to volunteer, please feel free to email me. I think my email is working now. Paula was having a heck of a time getting things back from me, but you can go ahead and email me, or I can put my phone number in the chat and you can text me.
And what's your deadline, Jessica?
The deadline for this, and I'm gonna try and get a thumbs up from Kylie, but we want to have everything due by the 11th. So next week, turning into the artist. Okay, yeah, she gave me a thumbs up. Just so that we can start getting everything printed and ready to go, because this, like I said, this is the closest we've ever been. We are going to start breaking ground on this and demoing the building soon.
So you're looking for permission from the business that they'd like a QR code on the mural. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I think our Sound Transit guests are here. Thank you all so much. I know you've just come from a marathon meeting. So I'm going to welcome Lita Shahim, who's the Government and Community Relations Manager for Central Corridor, which is kind of our area of interest. Alexis Lair, Community Engagement Specialist. Laura Radford, Community Engagement as well. And Emily Yasukochi, Interbay Ballard Segment Lead. So with that, we're going to let them tell us about the huge West Seattle to Ballard project that's going to touch us on at least two sides. So the uptown side and the west side of Queen Anne, and it will be a major project for many years to come. So I'm going to turn it over to Lita or whoever wants to take the lead on this. Thank you all for being here.
Oh, thanks, Paula. I'm going to take the lead tonight. Where all of us are trying to figure out ways to balance all the engagement we're doing. So thanks for those introductions. Again, my name is Alexis Lair. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist, and I work very closely with Emily and Lita and Laura in the Interbay Ballard segment team, as well as the downtown segment. I did see that Janice and Jason are here already. So we're going to have maybe a more abbreviated presentation. So thanks for bearing with us, but we'll have a little bit more time to have kind of a discussion at the end. I'm going to share my screen. And while I'm sharing my screen, if there are questions in the chat, Paula, would you be able to monitor that for me?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I'll mention that Janice Traven and Jason Bennett, who are with us, are actually on the community advisory group for the ST3 project for the Interbay to Ballard segment. It's broken up into sections because it's such a huge project. So we're very happy that they're here and will be available to us as resources.
Awesome. So before I begin, can Emily, Laura, and Lita unmute yourselves and just do a quick introduction just to say hi?
Sure, I'll start. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Emily Yasukochi. I am the segment manager for the Interbay Ballard segment of the West Seattle and Ballard Link Extensions project for Sound Transit. So nice to be with you all tonight. And it's great to see such a nice big group. It's really exciting that you all are interested in this. So thanks.
Lita Shahim, Government Community Relations Manager at Sound Transit. As Paula kindly mentioned right at the beginning, good to see everyone. I'll hand it over to Laura.
Hi, Laura Radford with Sound Transit. I am a project specialist and I work with this fabulous team on the Ballard to West Seattle Link Extension. Nice to see everybody this evening.
Great, thank you three. All right, so the agenda tonight, we did some welcome introductions. We'll do a project overview and talk a little bit about the project timeline. Then Emily's going to talk a little bit about alternatives, the environmental review process, and then we will close it with some community engagement resources and then have some time for, I believe, Q&A. And we may not be able to get all of the answers to some of your questions tonight, but I encourage you, if you haven't done it already, to watch the QACC meeting from tonight. It is saved, so you can rewatch it on YouTube, which does focus on the draft AS results overview. And then also for those who are interested in the Uptown neighborhood and the kind of the stations, the Seattle Center station alternatives, tomorrow night's QACC meeting, Community Advisory Group meeting, is focused on downtown and will also provide an overview of the draft EIS results. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a kind of larger timeline or larger projects. So Sound Transit, We are a regional transportation authority, and we kind of serve the areas of King County, Snohomish County, and Pierce County. And Sound Transit's voter approved system expansion means that every few years, new light rail, bus rapid transit, and commuter light rail stations open throughout the regions, providing fast, reliable alternatives to congested roads. You'll see here, this map here is kind of the future of where our expansion packages are going. You'll see that this is an added 116 miles of link light rail track. It will add 91 miles of Sounder commuter rail and then 45 miles of Stride bus rapid transit. In the next 3 years, we'll be adding 28 new stations by 2024, which included the Northgate opening, which was last fall. We will also be opening in Hilltop, Tacoma, Eastlink, so Bellevue, Redmond side, Linwood, Federal Way, and then some other ones is that we have some operations and maintenance facilities. One on the east side opened already, and the Puyallup Station Garage. Today, we're going to focus heavily on the West Seattle Ballard Extensions project. So this project was included in the Sound Transit 3 voter approved plan in 2016. And it includes 2 light rail extensions. So it's the West Seattle link extension and then the Ballard link extension and a new light rail only downtown tunnel. That's part of the Ballard link extension. It will add 12 miles of light rail service and serve 14 stations. To get into a little bit of our project timeline, first you can see in green the planning phase, which we began in 2017 and will continue through 2023. And then you'll see the design phase in yellow, which begins in 2023 and will continue through 2027. Note that the design of the West Seattle extension is scheduled to wrap up in 2026, while the Ballard extension concludes in 2027. And that's because the Ballard extension segment requires a new downtown tunnel, and it takes a little bit longer to design and build. And then following the design is the construction phase in red, which is scheduled to begin in 2026. And you may have heard a little bit about Sound Transit's board decision back in late summer, around August, to adjust project timelines for some future expansion projects. So that includes the West Seattle and Ballard Link Extensions project. And this was in face of rising real estate and construction costs. The board action identifies 2032 as the date that we can affordably deliver the West Seattle Link service. So that's from Soto to Alaska Junction. And then for the Ballard Link extension, Sound Transit is managing toward a 2037 target date. So it's working to close a project affordability gap that was most recently forecasted at 1.8 billion. So we're looking to reduce or eliminate this gap by increasing funding and support at the local, state, and national levels, and by reducing costs as the board considers and adopts some project alignment options. So if it's not possible to close the gap, the current financial assumptions reflect Sound Transit's ability to affordably open service from Smith Cove in 2037 and to Smith Cove in 2037 and to Ballard in 2039. So to recap, we anticipate opening the West Seattle in 2032, and then we're managing toward a 2037 target date for the full Ballard extension. For the stations that you're interested in, that would mean that the Seattle Center would open 2037, and if we are not able to close that gap, it would be 2039 to Ballard. So I'm going to go into a little bit more into details about the planning phase. So right now we're in the environmental review process, but where we came from was in 2017 to 2019, we were in something called the alternatives development phase, where we were working with a stakeholder advisory group, an elected leadership group, and the public. And we were looking at a variety of different alternatives or station and route options. And working with these groups, we started kind of refining these processes that led to the Sound Transit Board in May and October of 2019 to identify the alternatives that we are now studying in the draft environmental impact statement. So this is where we are now. We began the formal comment period process last Friday, so on January 28th. And we have published the draft EIS for comment. And the draft EIS, and Emily will talk about it a little bit later, but it's a document that analyzes the potential benefits and the effects of each different station and route alternative. The formal comment period will be 90 days, so it'll be from January 28th to April 28th. And then once that comment period closes, the board will use the analysis from the draft EIS and the agency and public comment to confirm or modify a preferred alternative. And then for the remainder of the environmental phase, we will be working to publish a final EIS. And then we expect in 2023 will be the time when the board will select the project to be built. So this map shows the alternatives that we're studying in the environmental phase. You'll see here is north, so Ballard is up here. And the preferred alternatives are in pink and in brown, and the other alternatives are in blue. So you'll see that there's all three colors kind of in the Ballard Inner Bay area, and then just the preferred and the other alternatives between Inner Bay and Seattle Center. So the term preferred alternative makes clear to the public where the project is headed. So it indicates a preference among alternatives to be considered, but is not a final decision or an obligation. Some of the preferred alternatives require third-party funding, and you can see the two in Ballard here. This originally meant that the Sound Transit would need to have additional funding to cover costs that were added. That were not identified in the voter-approved Sound Transit 3 plan. You'll see later that from our analysis in the draft EIS, the gap has closed a bit, and Emily will talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We will complete the same level of analysis on all the alternatives in the draft EIS phase, so regardless if they're preferred or not. And so the board could change or modify the preferred alternative based on that draft EIS and that public feedback. So this slide is just to remind folks that we published the draft EIS. We are now in that comment period phase. It's a 90-day phase, and again ends on April 28th. This is a high-level timeline of some of the major project processes, along with some community engagement activities for the project. Lita did talk about this and talks about it at every CAG meeting. And you'll see here that in the dark gray, this represents the comment period. And here are some of the activities. The community advisory groups kicked off back in the fall. And then early January focused on station planning as a topic. And then tonight just went over the draft EIS results overview. The next CAG meeting will focus on draft EIS results, kind of deep dive topics. And then you'll see each has a topic or a focus. Please also note here that we have public meetings. They are virtual, four for virtual, and one will be in person. And those are all scheduled for March. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later and where you can find resources and save the date. And then here you'll see kind of the board's processes for confirming or modifying the preferred alternative and as it relates to the different CAG meetings. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Emily, who's going to talk about the alternatives.
Great, thank you, Alexis. And hello, good evening again, everyone. So yeah, I'm going to go through the alternatives covered in the draft EIS. If we go to the next slide, I know that the Seattle Center station in the downtown segment is of interest to folks. I'll touch just very briefly on that, but really I'm going to be focusing on the South Inner Bay and Inner Bay Ballard segments with you all. If you, let's see, yeah, if you go to the next slide, that focuses in on downtown. So just, I wanted to point out just a couple things before I get into the Inner Bay Ballard. segment. So the Seattle Center station locations, I just want you to notice the two options there. So the pink preferred alternative has a station located on Republican Street. And that's important because where it connects to the alternatives moving north. And then in blue, that alternative has a station location located on Mercer. So those are the two alternatives for the Seattle Center station in the draft EIS, and that will be important. Tomorrow night, if you're in for another evening meeting, you can watch along with the downtown community advisory group meeting. That starts at 5, and there is a YouTube link that I bet Alexis could probably paste into the chat. Or Laura, so that if you're interested, you can watch along and learn about sort of similar level of, actually more detailed even information that I'm going to go in tonight for north of here. You'll be able to learn tomorrow night about the downtown alternatives. So just want to put a plug in for that. Since my specialty really is the Inner Bay Ballard segment, I am going to focus on that. So here is an overview of the Inner Bay Ballard segment. And now note that our maps are twisted so that north is to the right. So pretty much I think all the maps that I will be going over with you, the north is going to now be to the right. All right, so we will start with the South Inner Bay segment. Yep, and that is right here. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this has all of the alternatives on it. And I'm just going to briefly kind of describe each of these alternatives, what their profile is. So if they're elevated, at grade, et cetera, and then kind of where the station locations are and what they connect to. So we'll start with the pink or preferred alternative. So remember the alternatives we looked at in downtown. So this one comes from the Seattle Center station that's on Republican. So that's important. It remains in a so that Republican Seattle Center station is a tunnel station, so that it would remain underground until it exited a tunnel portal in the vicinity of Republican and Elliott. From there, it would be elevated, an elevated guideway that would head north up along Elliott Avenue West, cross over to the east side of it, up along the east side, and then it would cross back over to the west side to serve an elevated Smith Cove Station above the Gaylor Street flyover. The alternative would then continue over the Magnolia Bridge, and then this is all elevated guideway through the Armory property, and then it lines up basically north-south, due north-south, between the Inner Bay Golf Center and the BNSF yard there, and then it connects at about Dravis to the next segment up. So I will talk about that. Okay, so next, I'll talk about the Prospect Street Station 15th Avenue alternative. And as you can see by the bubble, it's pointing to the pink line, but you can imagine it as a blue line that is directly underneath the pink line. So that one also comes from the Republican, no, other one, Alexis. Yep, so that one also comes from the Republican Seattle Center location, has that portal at Republican and Elliott. And then elevated guideway up, yep, exactly, to up Elliott. And then it serves an elevated Smith Cove station at Prospect Street. So the station would be on the east side of Elliott at Prospect Street. And then it would continue to the north and a little bit to the west, kind of hugging the hillside, mostly elevated, but a little bit of that section would be either retained cut or sort of at grade, depending on where it hits the hillside. And then it would continue, join 15th Avenue West, and then continue up 15th Avenue West in the median, elevated, all elevated. Okay, and then finally, we have the Prospect Street Station Central Inner Bay alternative. So this is the one that connects to the Mercer Street Seattle Center location. This one, after it leaves the Mercer Street Seattle Center station, would remain in a tunnel all the way until it got to Prospect Street. So all of that piece of it is still in tunnel. The portal then would be located right approximately at Prospect Street. And then a retained cut station would be just north of the portal there. It would then also continue along the hillside, hugging the hillside, but then it would cross 15th to the west side and then travel, and it becomes elevated here, crosses over 15th and then travels up Armory Way and then curves to the north to basically join essentially the preferred alternative. So it'd be elevated in between the golf center and the railroad tracks. Okay, so those are our South Inner Bay alternatives. And actually, I want to make sure that it's clear. So are there any questions just about like what the alternatives are before I go any farther? We'll get into effects and such, but just want to make sure the alternatives are clear.
I think somebody asked a question about what third-party funding meant. I'm not sure if we were clear.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing that in the chat now. So yeah, Alexis talked about this a little bit, but it's related to in the when the Sound Transit Board was identifying alternatives to study in the draft EIS, those that had that third-party funding tag kind of associated with them had elements or costs that were beyond what was included in the voter approved package. So that third-party funding, it's not specifying any specific third party. It's just identifying where funding would be needed to cover additional costs over and above what was included in the voter approved plan.
I think
so. That's what.
Okay.
Oh, so go ahead.
Yeah, just to add on to that. So my question is, I noticed that the third party funding was only applicable to the area from, well, basically where the route crosses across the ship canal. So the third party funding is not in place, but I guess there's an expectation that there would be third party funding.
I'll get into that and
okay.
Yeah, I'll get into that. But great, it's a great question. Okay. And one we get a lot. So yeah, for sure. We'll talk about that. Okay. Let's see. I see a question. A Memorial Stadium rebuild and its memorial. Okay, so that's actually a great question for the downtown segment. And Alexis, what's the best way to get that question answered?
I think some of the questions, if we don't have answers today, we will write them down on the list and we will be able to respond offline.
Great. Okay. Yeah.
You can get those.
Super. Okay. And then I don't understand the 2 Gaylor Street stations, both on the preferred line. So it's actually just one. There's 2 labels for the Gaylor Street Station Central Inner Bay to identify the alignment. But there's just the one preferred station that is over Gaylor Street. We just put 2 labels on it because it was a little confusing south of the stations, which alternative was which.
It's an either or, it's not both.
Right.
Yep. And
then elevated over the Magnolia Bridge. Yep. So the pink or preferred alternative does go from that station over Gaylor over the Magnolia Bridge. That's right. I did say that. And at what point in the process are the routes chosen and locked? Great question. Alexis, do you want to go back to the timeline or the planning phase, second slide of the planning phase? And I'll go over that again. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So the process moving on from here, we just published the draft EIS. We'll go through this public comment period, and then the board will either confirm or modify. Then we will publish the final EIS in 2023, and it's after we publish the final EIS that board selects projects to be built. That is the equivalent of determining which project is gonna be chosen and locked in. So we are, though, I would say we get to only a certain level of design by that point. And so there are, design still happens after that, but basically the station and alignment locations are chosen at that point.
there's a question about high bridge or low bridge, but I know you're going to get to that. So if we just hold that question,
Yeah, we can move on.
that'll be answered pretty quickly.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we can talk about the high level, just kind of summary of some of the key findings or results from the draft EIS. So I will tell you, so there's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things here. We study a ton of things in the draft EIS. So this is just, we've pulled out a few measures where there were some pretty clear differentiations between the alternatives to kind of highlight where they're different. But again, the draft EIS has a list of dozens of different things that we look at. I'm actually going to go over that. I'll show it to you later. A whole list of things that are considered in the draft EIS. So I don't want this to replace your review and consideration of the information in the draft EIS. There's just a ton more there. But we wanted to, kind of highlight some of the information for you all. So for project cost, the preferred alternative is, oh, and sorry, let me explain just a little bit about the color coding. I forgot to do that earlier tonight. But if you see, there's a little key in the bottom right-hand corner, sort of indicating just a general sense of the performance of the alternatives within, each of these categories. And so the darker shades indicate higher performing and lighter shades indicate lower performing. So for project cost, the Gaylor Street Station Central Inner Bay has the lowest at approximately 1.3 billion. The residential displacements are highest with the Gaylor Street Station and Gaylor Street Station Central Inner Bay and Prospect Street Station 15th Avenue alternatives. And that's because they have more above ground guideway. There's more of the third column to the right is underground. And so that's where those displacements are coming from. Historic property effects, highest for the Prospect 15th, but similar in the Gaylor Street Central Inner Bay, and lowest for the Prospect Station Central Inner Bay. Park effects, permanent park effects, so we have 3.1 acres for the Gaylor Street alternative, 0.7 acres for Prospect Street Station 15th Avenue, and 4 acres for Prospect Street Central Inner Bay. Those effects are coming both from a little bit of Kinnear Park, but primarily from the golf course, where the guideway passes behind the golf course and the Inner Bay ball fields. Biodiversity effects refers to basically wildlife habitat. So it's lowest for the Central Inner Bay Gaylor Street Station alternative, and highest for the Prospect Street Station Central Inner Bay alternative, and also higher on the higher end for the one in the middle, the Prospect Street 15th Avenue alternative. That is associated with, I pointed out that guideway that kind of hugs the Southwest Queen Anne, the bottom of the hillside there on Southwest Queen Anne. So the green belt is really where these numbers are coming from. And then roadway effects is associated with guideway in or near the arterial roadways of Elliott and 15th. So the Gaylor Street Station Central Inner Bay alternative has about 0.4 mile of guideway in or near the roadway. The Prospect Street Station 15th Avenue alternative has the highest at about a mile. A big chunk of that is where it's going up the middle of 15th, after the curve, where it goes up 15th. And then the Prospect Street Station Central Inner Bay has the lowest at 0.1 mile. And then we just included a couple of other considerations that we thought were important to point out. So both of the alternatives that have a station at Prospect Street are in, and then the guideway from the north of there are in the area of some steep slopes, a steep slope environmentally critical area. And so it's an important engineering consideration as we move forward, the need to stabilize those slopes.
We have a few questions, Emily, if I can.
Okay, great.
So on the residential displacements, who are those affecting? The buildings in Lower Queen Anne? And I think the bigger question that I have is, when we're doing our review, can we get a list of the actual buildings that will be impacted, so that we're not just knowing that 174 units are going to be replaced, but we know which they are? And
yes, the draft EIS. So the short answer is a big chunk of those are Lower Queen Anne, Uptown, West, Southwest not exactly sure the kind of name of that particular area of Queen Anne, but yes, so that is a chunk of them. It's not all of them. And yes, the draft EIS has a, it does list out affected properties. And it's either, I think it's not in the main document. I think you have to go to one of the appendices.
Okay.
Alexis.
I'll show, yeah, I'm gonna run through the website. And I'm
Oh,
gonna
great.
all the different, like I've written down,
Okay, great.
Paula has emailed me tonight and I'm
Okay,
like,
great.
this, and this on the website. So
Great.
I'll show
Okay.
you where you can find that information on our website and
Yeah,
go directly
that's
to the
available.
document.
Yep.
And a couple
go
of
ahead.
quick questions about the impact on parks. Is a park effect a loss or gain of park land? So are we actually losing park land, or is it disrupting park land for a while or whatever? And then can you address the amount of trees that would have to be removed for those options that require tree removal?
Okay, so for the first one, the park effects that are listed here are permanent park effects. The draft EIS does cover both temporary and permanent effects, or excuse me, like temporary being related to construction and permanent park effects. So, but the ones we're showing you here are the permanent park effects.
Okay.
So that would be loss of park property essentially associated with these alternatives. Sound Transit would be on the hook to replace it. And then the amount of trees, I do not have an answer to that now, but we can note that question and see what sort of information we can get back on that.
Thank you. That's all for right now.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about Inner Bay Ballard. And are you interested, and maybe Paul, I'll ask you to just speak for the group. Are you interested in the entire segment or just really the Inner Bay Station area? Or do you want me to talk about Ballard too?
We'd like to hear about Inner Bay, and then we'd like to hear how you get to Ballard.
Okay, great. Yep.
We're not
okay.
so much concerned once you cross the water.
Okay.
I mean, we're concerned, but that's not our primary.
Right. Okay, great. Good to know. Okay, so here are the alternatives in the Inner Bay Ballard segment. And again, we break these up into segment for like they're basically segments that we analyze in the draft EIS. So you'll see the same kind of segment designations when you go to the draft EIS document. So this is the Inner Bay Ballard segment. And again, I'll start with the preferred alternative in pink. So the preferred alternative, I'll note, connects to either, so there were two alternatives in the previous segment that came from behind the golf course, kind of between the golf course and the railroad tracks. So so the first couple that I'll talk about connect only to those ones. So starting with the pink, we're elevated behind the golf course. We go over the Dravis Street bridge and then serve an elevated Inner Bay Station that's located in the 17th and Thorndike area north of Dravis. Then we continue to the north and curving to the east through that area of Inner Bay, cross over 15th, and then kind of swing to the north to line up with 14th Avenue Northwest, so 13th Avenue West on the south side. And then cross over Salmon Bay in a high level fixed bridge. So the clearance in the conceptual design for this bridge is, gosh, I think it's 136 feet. So you can think of it as a similar clearance height to the Aurora Bridge. It would then touch down on the north side and then go up the middle of 14th Avenue, terminating at an elevated Ballard station at 14th and Market. Okay, so next I'll talk about the brown lines. So those are the tunnel alternatives. So those both are, they're tunnels. So in order to get into the tunnel, you have to start, before you get to Dravis, you'd actually have to start diving down and go underneath Dravis. So again, you could come from either of those two alternatives between the golf course and BNSF, dive down, go underneath Dravis, and then serve a retained cut station in a similar area there at 17th and kind of Thorndike. Because of the curvature of the station's a little bit farther north, but generally in the same location. You would then continue diving down and then enter a tunnel portal just south of the Nickerson interchange. So then at that point, and so you're west of 15th and south of Nickerson. And then you're in a tunnel and you tunnel underneath Salmon Bay. And then there's just two station options. One is at 15th, just south of Market, and the other one is at 14th underneath both sides. So with entrances on either side of Market. Okay, so then we'll talk about 15th Avenue. So then this one connects to the alternative that comes up the middle of 15th. So there's just the one alternative that comes up the middle of 15th. As it approaches Dravis, it would go over Dravis. So again, we'd have 15th. I like to do my little arm gesture, 15th, and then Dravis, and then the light rail above it, and station. Okay, so that elevated station, and then it would, it has two ways it could get to Ballard. It could either go west and cross on the west side of the Ballard Bridge in a movable bridge. So one that would be slightly like higher than the Ballard Bridge when closed, about 70 feet, as opposed to the Ballard Bridge, which I think is in the 30 to 40 range. So 70 feet when closed, but then it would open up to allow taller vessels through. That alternative would continue north, eventually join up with 15th and serve an elevated 15th station above 15th Avenue south of Market. And then that alternative can also connect to that 14th high level bridge. So that's just showing that it's, but it's the same height bridge, same Ballard station at 14th and Market. Okay. Any questions on this like what the alternatives are here before I get into the.
So somebody had asked that you cover the entire segment.
Okay, yep, I did.
I think you did, yeah.
I did, yeah. It's kind of hard not to once I get going.
Here's a question. Is the option on the west side of the Ballard Bridge not doable from the preferred option? So can the pink line follow the west route?
The west
or why or why not?
Right.
Yeah.
Those two do not connect to one another. And the 15th alternative that kind of goes up 15th and then goes to the west side is essentially what was included. It's kind of what we call the representative alignment for the ST3 plan. But then once we got into alternatives development and through the analysis that was done there, these other alternatives sort of rose a little bit higher to the top. So it does not have that connection doesn't exist in the draft EIS, I would say, like designs.
Okay, we'll probably ask that question again.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about a summary of some of the high-level EIS results. So getting back to the cost question and the third-party funding question. So as you can see, looking at the top line here, the elevated 14th Avenue, tunnel 14th Avenue, and elevated 15th Avenue are all coming in at pretty similar costs. The elevated 14th has a range depending on what it connects to the south. But on the lower range, it is similar to the tunnel 14th and the elevated 15th. So if these costs were to hold, and again, we do estimates kind of throughout and at multiple times along the process. If these hold, then we may not be looking at third-party funding for that tunnel 14th because it is in line with the anticipated costs of the project from the financial planning perspective. The tunnel 15th, though, is still showing a cost increase over over the financial, basically what we have in our financial plan. And so that one, if these held, would still need third-party funding. Okay, so I hope that kind of clears that part up of it a little bit. And then I'll just move on to residential displacements. So those are lowest for the tunnel alternatives and higher for the elevated 14th bridge option, and then also on the lower side for the elevated 15th option. Historic property effects are highest for the elevated 15th Avenue option. 3 of the 10 there are associated with Fisherman's Terminal. 2 individual properties, and then it's eligible as a historic district as a whole. So because that option goes through Fisherman's Terminal, that contributes to that number there. And then in terms of employee displacements, that is highest with the elevated 14th and elevated 15th options, and lower comparatively in the 2 tunnel alternatives and the elevated 14th that connects to 15th. And then in terms of in-water effects, those are none with the tunnel alternatives, and 1.2 acres for the 14th Avenue alternatives and 0.8 acres for the 15th Avenue alternatives. And that's associated with basically having parts of the bridge in the water. So there'd be bridge columns in the water in Salmon Bay. And then with the 14th, those are higher because there is also a boat ramp, the boat ramp in Ballard at 14th, at the 14th Street end. And then there's also a stormwater outfall at 14th on the Ballard side that would need to be relocated. And so that has some additional in-water effects. The relocation has some additional in-water effects. So that's why those are higher. Okay, and then in terms of the other considerations for each of these, so with the bridge alternatives, there would be some maritime business displacements, associated with needing to build the bridge, foundations and approach structures on the land near the water, and those are difficult to relocate because they are water dependent, and it's difficult to find available water, available property that is similar in function and use. So that is a consideration for all of the bridge alternatives. For the 14th bridge alternatives, as I mentioned before, there's a boat ramp and a stormwater outfall that would both need to be relocated. And then in the tunnel 15th option, there would be some construction closures associated with construction of the station on 15th. And it's noted here because it's an important freight corridor and arterial roadway. And then finally, under the elevated 15th Avenue alternative, it is important to note that because it's a movable bridge, there would be delays whenever that, delays to the link system when that bridge would need to open to allow vessel traffic to pass through. It would have the same restrictions as a Ballard Bridge, so it would be restricted during peak times, but there would be certain vessels that would be exempt from that. And then it would, basically need to open for vessels that couldn't fit underneath. So, and that, has implications not just for the Ballard line, but basically everything that the Ballard line connects to. So I'm gonna stop talking for a second.
We have a few questions, and I don't know if these are ones you'll answer, but first question is, if the costs stay the same, would the tunnel become the preferred option? I assume that like the 14th tunnel, because it's, at least on paper right now, it's one of the cheapest. So would that make it a preferred option?
So the board decides the preferred, will decide on the preferred alternative. And they take into consideration, lots of different factors, not just cost. And it also, I should have noted earlier, it's important to understand that this is just a piece of a larger project. The West Seattle piece of it also has third-party funding options. And so and just alternatives that have different costs. And so it, they're going to be looking at the project in its entirety when they make their decision on confirming or modifying the preferred alternative and ultimately the project to be built. And now they're not just taking the draft information, draft EIS information into consideration. As Alexis talked about, like this comment period is super important because, and talking to groups like yours and having the community advisory groups are super important because the board needs to hear from folks about what their concerns and what they think should be the most important considerations.
Okay, and there's a request to add a parks effect to this section because of the impact on the boat ramp and the pier on 14th Avenue Northwest. So it's spoken about, but it's spoken about as a water consideration rather than a parks consideration.
Got it.
That is park.
Okay. Yeah, so that information is included in the draft EIS. So again, we were trying to highlight a few, but that's great feedback. Thank you for that.
Those are all the questions for now. So.
Okay, and it looks like there was one more. Is this why is the preferred alternative the preferred alternative?
Right.
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
I think so. Back, when in the previous phase before the environmental review phase that we're currently in, we were in the alternatives development phase where we were looking at a variety of different route and station alternatives, and they were refined. And then the board selected alternatives to be studied in the draft EIS. They selected a preferred alternative, but it's just a preference or an indication of where the project is headed. But again, it's not an obligation or a decision at that point. So then, fast forward to now, when we have the draft EIS released, we're seeking public comment from you all, and we're looking to have that public comment with the analysis help the board either confirm the existing preferred alternatives or modify them or change them. So, any more in the chat, or can we move on to the environmental review part?
That's
yes, this is a great comment for the board.
If it matters at all, the impacts are so very much lower in the 14th tunnel option. It seems crazy to consider an elevated option with all the residential displacements, environmental effects, and potential costs. That's a comment for the board. Okay. It'll probably be a comment in our review. So thank you. Okay.
And Lita, I'm gonna pass Sharon's question over to you.
Sure. So Sharon, you asked, can money from the federal infrastructure funds be used to build a ship canal tunnel? So, in our overall project financials, we do have an assumption for both funding from our ST3 plan that was assumed with that and through that voter approved package, but then also there is some federal funding that's associated with that and expected with it. The federal interest, we're always looking for opportunities, the federal infrastructure, whatever we're tracking at the federal level of new resources. Those are definitely things to be looking at. I would say though, looking at this graphic here, it's a comment potentially for the board as to what to prioritize that is preferred even beyond cost. I think someone mentioned earlier in the chat what they feel like about the tunnel options versus others, and for various reasons, that's a perfect kind of thing to share with our board. On the funding side of things, there's a lot I think that the agency is looking at, that affordability gap, for example, that we mentioned earlier on, and trying to move up the Ballard opening timeline, because we are looking at 2039 without additional resources. So that's another way that kind of those extra funds can be looked at. But those are the kinds of things we are tracking, and appreciate that comment, Sharon. Just a question of whether that would be applicable in this case. So I hope that was helpful.
Great, thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about environmental review. I know we've been talking about it, but here's the list I promised of all of the things that are typically studied in an environmental impact statement. And so It covers the effects to the natural and built environment and transportation systems. So, you know, everything from transit service to how it affects, you know, arterial and local street systems, navigation, freight, all sorts of items under the built environment side. So displacements and acquisitions, visual effects, parks. We've talked quite a bit about public services. You know, how would public services be affected by these alternatives, and then natural environment, air quality, ecosystems, and on. So lots of great information in the draft EIS about how these different alternatives would affect these. And a note that there is an environmental justice focus area within each area of the EIS. So we are watching out for how the different alternatives may and trying to avoid any disproportionate effects on environmental justice communities. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Alexis.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our community engagement efforts right now, and then I'm going to give you kind of a tutorial of our Participate Online site that's in the chat, our online open house, and talk to you because there's a ton of resources in there. We, of course, have our community advisory groups that are ongoing, and I talked about that earlier. I've talked about the draft EIS meetings, and for those of you, some of you may have received a mailer, a near neighbor mailer. When the draft EIS was released, it was delivered to 132,000 addresses in the project corridor from West Seattle all the way up to Ballard. All right, this is my cue to stop sharing this and share my other screen. So here I'm going to walk you through our website. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. Great. So this is our online open house. This is our one-stop shop for
Hey, Alexis.
Yes.
Is there any way to increase the size of it? It's a little bit small. There, perfect.
Oh.
Thank you.
There we go. There we go. Thank you. So this is our one-stop shop for almost all the resources you will need to comment, to find information about the draft EIS. So quick orientation at the very top, this bar, we have created in our top 4 languages of Spanish, Simplified Chinese, Traditional Chinese, and Vietnamese. You can also use this drop-down menu to translate into other languages using Google Translate. You'll see our comment period is listed here, and then you'll see that there's a tab for each sort of topic or focus, and I'll talk a little bit about each. So the welcome page, you'll see, we want you to share your thoughts by the 28th. We talk a little bit about the project, kind of high level introduction. We talk about, you know, how your comments and the draft EIS analysis will inform the board's ultimate decision. And then scrolling down multiple areas of the site, we really want to focus in on those online public meetings. So the 2 that might be of interest for you are the March 15th and the March 22nd meetings. And then we will have an in-person drop-in event scheduled for the 17th. We're hoping that COVID can help us have an in-person event so that people can kind of see us in person and talk to staff directly. So it's not just through a screen, but you can ask project questions. And here at these public meetings, there will be a court reporter so people can give testimony, oral testimony of their public comment. So the next tab is an overview tab. Gets into a little bit more details about the project. There's a project timeline drop-down bar here. Very similar, just a different visual way of talking about where we were and where we're headed. And then one thing that I would like to kind of highlight is this part, learning more about the alternatives. So if you click on each, you will get a map that Emily talked about, and there's these little arrows. and you can slide through and get a description. Let me make it just a little bit smaller so you can see. You can have a description on the bottom of what the alternatives are, and you can kind of filter through those. And if you scroll down, there are the comparative slides. So here is the overview, and then you'll have one of each. So this is the information that was presented at the CAG meeting just now. So you can go through and toggle through and see some of the other considerations through each alternative. This is the section that I really wanted to talk to you about, Paula, because you had some questions. So this tab is the Draft EIS tab. It talks about, again, what the Draft EIS is, how to comment. You can also add the meetings to your calendar. And then here is information on where you can review the Draft EIS. So this drop down, you can click here and the whole document is right there if you care to overwhelm yourself, or we have a lot of other resources to kind of help guide you through it. You can also request a printed copy of the executive summary and then a flash drive containing the complete Draft EIS, and that's for free. And you just email this person here, Dominique, and they can provide that for you. And then also there are several public reading room locations, public libraries in which you cannot check it out, but you can look at the Draft EIS in paper format. They're also at a couple organizations in the CID and Delridge area. The Draft EIS executive summary is available in English and transcreated in these other languages. And then here's the part where there's a Draft EIS table of contents. So you can look through each chapter and see everything. And if you're like, that feels overwhelming, and you want to ask more specific questions, here's a quick reference bookmark. So we're trying to think of anticipated questions folks might have. And then there's a resource and a link to where it's located in the document. So, how were the alternatives developed? You click on it and it will bring you to the page in the Draft EIS of where it's located. I'm looking at, this is the one, how many properties may be affected by the project. It's broken up by the two projects, so the West Seattle Link Extension and the Ballard Link Extension. You can look at, would any parks and recreation facilities be affected? And it also links you to that area in the Draft EIS. And then there's several other questions that you can look through. So I encourage you all to go to the site and sort of poke through. And then for commenting now, there's a section that's like tips for writing a helpful comment. So some folks may not know what to say. And so we have kind of a guide on our website. And then you can comment in a variety of ways. And we made it really easy. So although commenting in the chat in this meeting won't be counted, you could just, go and then put it in this comment bar, put your first name, last name, your email, put the comment in, and it's sent right to us. And that's a comment to the board. There are other ways you can comment. As I mentioned, you can attend our public meetings. You can also handwrite a letter or email this, or you can leave a voicemail with your comment. And then I know that some of you had some interest in some of the station planning work. If you have not watched the CAG meetings from early January, I do encourage you to watch that. There are links on this website, so you can find the YouTube link and rewatch. But for those who want to get kind of a deeper dive, Sloan Dawson, our station planning colleague, has a station planning progress report out. And here is the full report. There's a summary and then also all the different kind of resources, and you can view it by station. And then there's also some other resources about how the city and Sound Transit partner. And then of course, there's the community advisory group page. So here's where if you wanted to look and see the agenda, the presentation and the meeting recording from January, you can click on this. And then it also gives you information about upcoming meetings. And then finally, we do have a tab for property owners. We are here to support potentially affected property owners throughout this process. So there is a timeline as it relates to potentially affected property owners, so they kind of know what to expect. We have some frequently asked questions. And then we also, we have a couple guides and kind of resources for property owners, as well as property owner specific webinars. And then other ways to get involved. Again, we are really trying to focus those public meetings and trying to make them as accessible as possible on our website. You can talk to project staff. So there's an opportunity called office hours where you can schedule a 20-minute virtual meeting with our project teams. If you have questions about the draft EIS, here are the ways in which you can comment. You can sign up for a property owner meeting if one is a potentially affected property owner. You can request a briefing or a meeting with us. And here's other ways to stay engaged. So I'm going to stop sharing, and that is about the conclusion of the presentation. I know we're a little over time, and I apologize for that, Paula.
Okay, we have one more question too, that an address lookup might be helpful for properties affected. So is there such a thing where somebody could put an address in and see if they happen to be in the line of fire?
Well, we encourage folks to email us at wsblink@soundtransit.org, and we can talk with them and let them know if they are and they aren't. And if they are, we can provide different resources to help them get involved in the project.
Great. Okay, great. Any other questions? I'm appropriately overwhelmed. So.
Well, I will also say for property owners, we did mail and we sent a letter to anyone who was potentially affected in the fall, directing them to come to our webinars to learn more about the project. And so we are trying to find ways to make sure that potentially affected property owners are continually kind of reached out to and resourced to this project.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have questions going forward, and we'll follow those links and tips and tricks. So thank you though very much for everybody being here this evening. I know you've had a really long day. So we'll let you go home and take your eyes off the computer for a little bit. If there are no other questions right now, then thank you again. And we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate
Thanks,
your
Paula.
interest.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
You too. Okay, so now we can finish with our business. So we still have a couple of committees to hear from, Parks and Land Use. And I don't know if Denny is still with us. He wasn't feeling well and had laryngitis. So I had one thing to make a comment on. And but Don, the floor is yours if you'd like to give a quick update on what Parks has been up to.
Yes, and first I had a question for transportation. So I'm just going to start with where we ended on that. What I noticed on the agenda, and I wasn't able to get to the meeting, was you mentioned the Parks Boulevard. And so, but I didn't hear it when you did your report today, and maybe it'll be in the minutes. I did look and I saw they weren't there yet. So, I mean, that's okay. But just wondering why it was there and what you got in mind. It's a park. So I don't know. It's something I've worked on for many years. So if there's something there, I'd love to work with you on it.
There wasn't any specific project that we were discussing in particular. There were some ideas that had been thrown out in kind of like a visioning session in terms of what are some of the ways that people use different areas and whatnot, but there's nothing in particular to the Park Boulevard that we're actively working on.
All right. Yeah. Because as I like to tell people, it is a park. And as you noticed on your four-way stop, Parks tends to get involved, and it can be surprising. I mean, I've tried to for many years, and I've been promised by high-level people in meetings that they were going to start dealing with the encroachments, which would allow us to have where, yes, you've got the street, but then you have sometimes 30 feet of people's yards that people think are their yards and is actually Parks property right up to their front doorstep. So when you start to look at that and start thinking about what we could do with those areas, with walking paths and riding paths and running, it's incredible what we could do with that. So that's where if you want to try that again sometime, maybe make a point of letting me know. Happy to be involved. That was it. That was all I wanted to bring up on that one. Let's see. Well, I gave a report on the Smith Cove Park there, a little history. You can, I think I emailed it out. You can go to the Queen Anne Community Council website, go to committees, go to parks, click on Smith Cove Park, and go for it. I saw Carol Burton was, she may or may not still be here. I'm always happy for her to see it, and she can send me notes if I got something really wrong. But
I'm still here.
All right, we'll check it out and send me edits.
I'm going to get old over Smith Cove.
But it really is. It's an over $11 million parks purchase, and we don't seem to be able to do much with it. So it would be nice to turn it into something. As you know, the only other thing really is, it looks like they're going to start planting the trees on the boulevard. Signs have started to go up, so they're going to start the replacement. I've got to call into the arborist or email, actually. I haven't heard back. We all know that Parks turned down the idea of even considering or looking at an off-leash area.
I can't turn it off.
At David Rogers Park. It's a real shame. I read their email, and I sent them a note back saying that they didn't follow their process and that I was very disappointed that they did not. So that's it. I had high hopes. In 2017, they developed the process for this. They had an in-depth study. As you can see, there's a big, thick thing all about what they did, and they came up with this. And unfortunately, the same result has continued to happen. And so for those of you who don't want an off-leash area, I get it. For those of you who have dogs and would like one, I used to condemn people taking their dogs to parks. I've tried to convince parks and other people how important it is to get dogs into off-leash areas to protect our parks. We have these athletic fields, these artificial turf athletic fields. The Queen Anne Bowl is the smallest artificial turf field in the system of parks, and that is $1 million piece of carpet down there. And they replace it every 10 years. So if we can keep dogs off of it, it's weird. It's like we can save money, right? We can have lower maintenance on our parks. But I no longer can scoff or interject now with people after this latest result that they should not take their dogs and be illegal and be in the parks. I would like them to stay off the athletic fields. I really would, but what can I say if we don't give them an alternative? I feel sorry for the East Queen Anne playfield. It will continue to be destroyed. Parks has given up. They can't maintain it because all the dogs that go on it. You can see that. Really, I'm just really disappointed. And so, I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see it happening. For me, somebody could maybe try to spur me on, but really I'm kind of done. They're just not, Parks isn't going to do it.
Okay.
Do you have a question, Paula?
No, I was just going to ask if there's not going to be a Parks Committee meeting this month, right?
Yeah, there's nothing. I could, we could all sit around and go, yep, no off-leash area.
That's good.
If it is, then I'll have that bottle of scotch sitting right there, and it'll be a great meeting for me.
I don't mean to make light. I don't mean to make light of bad news, but at least we know if we want to bulk up our committee attendees, we just propose another off-leash park meeting.
There
You can get 100 people, no problem.
Yes, and I'm kind of disappointed. You know, I really think that I was going to try to involve the people involved with sports. They're very powerful. They have very powerful lobbying. They'll show up. I mean, they show up at meetings when they want something with 300-400 people, and 50 of them at least are kids, all dressed in their little uniforms, right? And
I'm gonna ask if we can maybe just take the discussion offline to a Parks Committee, because
we're done. You're hearing it.
Rehashing things here a
this
lot.
is it.
Well, I'm not done. And they did not follow their procedures, and I want to pursue this.
Okay.
And I have plans to do it somehow. Don, don't give up yet. Let's have a Parks Committee meeting and talk about it. There are other issues. Well, we need to get the one at Smith Cove too. We need to talk about that. So there are other parks issues we can discuss at a meeting.
Okay, I'll let Don decide if he's gonna change his mind. Right now, he's said there won't be a Parks Committee meeting this month, so look for
Just so you know, I'll send.
I've got my hand up. I mean,
Sorry.
Dawn, if you're gonna.
Yeah, go for it, Beth.
I think it'd be great if you wouldn't mind, like, just maybe shoot me an email, because I think it'd be great to record for the board. If we think that they didn't follow the procedure, just shoot us an email and tell us what we're talking about here, and not to get into it now, because I think it's gonna get into the weeds. But it seemed like the procedure was pretty straightforward, but if we think they didn't follow it, then let's pursue that and kind of talk about that offline as a group, so that we can make sure that we're being transparent in what we're doing. So,
Sure, no problem.
because I think it's a pretty big allegation to kind of say that they're not following the procedure. So
That's a good idea. So I just have one last thing.
Okay.
This isn't pleasant. Something odd happened, and after our last board meeting, we voted on a letter to send it to the, to send in this application. And I got a call the next morning by Paula that said the executive committee had rescinded the vote. And
that's not what I said, Don. I don't want to argue about it, but I said we had concerns, and that was all I said. So we hadn't rescinded the vote or anything.
We had concerns.
We were
well,
concerned.
Fine. If you don't want to hear it, then that's fine. But I think I heard pretty clearly what you told me. You told me not to send the letter, and I pushed back pretty hard, because the executive board does not have that thing. Now you can say that you didn't say it. That's okay. I'm not. It was you may think I'm just kind of wild over here, and but it's all right if you want to.
Okay, I think you and I can talk about this.
No, I don't need to.
Okay.
This was to bring it up to the board. I thought it was important enough to bring it up, and you don't believe that. You think I completely misunderstood our almost 45-minute conversation. So no problem. No problem.
Well, I am never going to do anything behind the back of the rest of this board. So let's get that straight. That doesn't mean I may not come to somebody and say there were concerns raised about an issue, even if the board voted on it, and what do we want to do? How do we approach it? Because I'm never going to pretend there aren't concerns when there are. So that's me. And if that's a concern to the full board, then I'm happy to.
Can I just address Stephen's question really quickly? And we don't need to get into it, Don and Paula, but at the last meeting, the Friends of the Park had submitted a letter. That letter was not shared with the board prior to the meeting. And so folks felt like they were voting on something that they did not have all of the information about. And so the concern was, should we share that concern with the rest of the board, that we felt that the vote was maybe made without all of the information, considering the fact that the community around the park, about 40 neighbors, had submitted that letter. And so that was primarily the concern. And we, ultimately, after a lot of discussion, the vote of the board of the council is very important. And like, we didn't want to go back on that. It was just raising the concern. I think moving forward, making sure that all of the information is kind of in everyone's hands, like well before the meeting. And so, that was my interpretation of it. I think we can move on, but I think that like lessons moving forward is everybody needs to have all of the information beforehand. And if folks on the board think that they don't have the information to make a vote, that needs to be taken more seriously, I think, than it was in the last meeting. So I think that that issue is a good kind of learning for everyone, but I don't think that it's really kind of an issue. So that was really what the challenge was, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Nicole. So that was the point. And it wasn't meant to go behind anybody's back or anything else. It was meant that there were concerns and people didn't feel like they had the information. So anyway.
Can I make a comment before you're done?
Sure.
My recollection is that the people who had written the letter did present their side of it at our last board meeting. And it was mentioned that a copy of their letter, in fact, had not gone out to the board, but the board still took a vote. And I think that if the board as a whole had concerns that they didn't have all the information that we all needed, that's something that should have been brought up at the board meeting at that time. And there was no discussion about it that I recall. And the board ended up voting on it. So I think that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there's, I think it's hard to raise concerns after the board has already voted on something where that concern could have been raised during the board meeting or at the time that we were voting. I'm sorry that it ended up being a big concern after the board had already taken a vote.
Well, and I think for me, lesson learned was, sometimes we're rushing through things because we had a very full agenda. I probably didn't give enough time for discussions. It may or may not have changed, but anyway, so going forward, I can assure you it will be a more rigorous process. So, but there was nothing nefarious about going back to Don to express the concerns that had been expressed to me. So, and we discussed as the executive committee and agreed that we should at least let him know that there were those concerns raised. So
but I think that's something I feel that should have come out at the board meeting itself.
Right, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, but when they didn't come out at the board meeting, they came out later. Then it was like, well, we didn't want to just totally ignore it. So that was a question. So anyway,
in the end, their concerns didn't get ignored, and their concerns were actually referenced in the letter back from the Seattle Parks Department. So
yes.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it.
I just want to say one thing about the dog off leash process. There are always people who object. And I could have gone up on Queen Anne Avenue and probably gotten 500 signatures of people who would have supported it. The park department is supposed to have a public forum to hear all sides of an issue. They are not supposed to just listen to one party, or in this case, the neighbors, because this has happened at every dog off leash area. So they're supposed to weigh and balance the benefits and the detriments of every area. And they did not follow through. They made an executive decision before we even had a chance to hear from members of the community. And so I just want to say that there should have been a public process, or should be. There should have been a public meeting. There should be advertised. People should be able to turn out. I live close to the park, not adjacent to it, but I'm a neighbor.
Okay.
Don's a neighbor. We should be able to express our opinions as well, and they did not give us an opportunity. So,
and I think that's what we asked Dawn to, if there's truly a belief that they failed to follow their process, then to write something expressing that, because I'd have to frankly go back and look at the process. I don't have it memorized, and so I can't say anything more about that.
And they have summarily prevented us from having parks at almost every location that we have presented to them. So there's something wrong at parks, and we need to take it up with the executives at the park department.
I think we're getting some new leadership at parks, so hopefully that'll make a change. But, okay, the last comment, and I'll make a very brief comment. I don't know if Denny's still here, if he doesn't want to try to use his hoarse voice. He just had a very brief update on the this is on the determinant of non-significance on the increased density. So there are certain elements of that appeal that have been raised by TreePack that there was a question about whether they had standing to bring those complaints into the appeal. So it is proceeding, but that's why he decided not to go ahead right away and contribute the money that was approved. He wanted to wait and see what happens with the hearing that will be, I believe, on the February 11th is when the decision from the hearing examiner is expected. So he will know more than how they rule on the various elements that were in the original complaint. So I think then he'll make a decision, and we may proceed as the board approved, or he may ask the board to reconsider, you know, the amount of money approved, or approving any money, or maybe more money. I don't know what the decision will be. So that was really the only thing from LERC that I had. And all of the minutes or notes that the committees have are, they'll be referenced in the newsletter, and in the minutes, they're in the summary, and they're on the G drive. So I think, I don't know if Amy Carlson is still here. I did have one announcement to make about the Friends of David Rogers Park. They have actually an official stewards group, and they are reactivating themselves to do some work at the park, and just want people to know. So if you are interested, I put Amy's contact in the chat right at the beginning, and you can contact Amy to get on the list to find out when they're doing cleanups or whatever work in the park they may be doing. And I think that is all I have, other than just to remind everyone, if you are concerned about graffiti, come out on the 12th, Bob, walk with us around the business corridor and take pictures of graffiti and practice using your Find It, Fix It app. So anything, okay, anything else? Okay, thank you. I know it's been a long meeting, a lot of information. We'll be talking a little bit more about the ST3 draft EIS review. If anybody just is really motivated, let me know. We'll figure out how we're going to parse that out. Uptown Alliance is working on it. Magnolia is working on it. So we're hoping that collectively we can lighten the load a little bit for everybody. So I think that's it. Anything else for the good of the order tonight?
Thank you, Paula.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
All right. Good night, everybody. I'm going for the scotch now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.